there's a lot of things that are happening virtually now. I've developed a lot of relationships and a lot of ideas with people that I never would have because they're in Europe or they're in Canada or they're in Florida, whatever it may be. But now we're like, hey, because we can't do it all ourselves, we should work together. Well, welcome back. Been a few months, but this is Behind the Ground with Rich Brubaker in.
Brian Tam, what's up, everybody?
What's up? So,
Been a long time.
It's been 4-5 months since we've done this. We didn't necessarily keep up our schedule as we originally thought we would. So Brian,
nothing really went to plan this year, right? Let's be honest.
Nothing. So that doesn't mean that we haven't been working or grinding, as it were. We just haven't been putting this together. So Brian, what have you been working on the last few months that made it so hard for us to schedule this?
Let me see if you've heard this before. I was pivoting. I mean, that's the word of the year, isn't it? Like everybody had to pivot, and I like everybody else is just trying to figure that out.
Yep.
I think the last time I talked, I was still in Lisbon. And I'm still here right now.
Yeah.
We are 6 Airbnbs later, however many months, and trying to figure out business.
Right.
We picked up some small things and like corporate clients, but then when that wasn't coming in, and I knew we weren't able to get back to China, and we were having a great time here in Lisbon, when we decided, okay, I need to make something work. So I've been working on a new video series of my own, doing individual consulting, so helping other entrepreneurs working through their own kind of either mental, emotional, or project struggles, and just consulting them along those aspects, and then just trying to figure it out, like keeping myself busy with tiny little projects that I keep thinking of this as investment. And this year I don't want it to be a waste, but I know it cannot be the traditional year. So I really changed a lot of my mental models for how I was looking about my own business. And I think you also mentioned some of these things about how you're looking at your business differently now too, right? So what's happened for you?
Like, it's like you put together, I was even thinking like I had this master plan of all this content, and I'm still working on it, but I just haven't gotten it out, right? And you can kind of take it a couple ways, like, oh, I've really wasted this time, or it's like, okay, like there were so many other things that really required other time, and this did take a back burner, which it should, like, I really think like should not have, but there were other things that like, look, I had a business to save, or at least like a business to look at and figure out how the 18 months was going to play out. I had the charity. I had to move the family around. I had a lot of real responsibilities that were competing, and in the shuffle
behind the grind,
you kind of got to pick and choose. And unfortunately there's only so many hours in the day. So yeah, man, been actually really busy. Actually spent quite a bit of time figuring like, what is the pivot? Where is it needed? Is it needed? And then what's the next year to 2 years look like? Because the tree got uprooted and been shaken out a little bit, and there's still some things that are familiar, but there's still a lot of things that I'm still trying to work through. But
yeah, so how are you feeling then? I mean, because so much has changed, and the business world itself has been turned upside down, right?
Yeah.
So for yourself, for your own business, just do a temperature check. Are you feeling all right?
We have not had the year that we were planning on in the first week of January, which was stellar. But some of those things that got dropped off in February are now actually starting to come back. And so we actually may see like a really amazing kind of end of year, and we'll see where things head up. But it catalyzed us to think very differently about how we view the future. Maybe some of the products we were working on that were kind of experimental and worked in a way where you could do events in person, where you could open up offices, where you could travel freely, like where you can do all those things. But now you're like, well, actually, we need to adjust to things that we hadn't thought about. And yeah, I'm not going to say it hasn't gone without some pain, but I would say that so far we're better off for it. Or I can see in 18 months we will be.
What do you think was the most painful part from that?
I think the most
Mhm.
painful part was actually just accepting that, like, yeah, we had all these
Yeah,
great things going and la, 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 and it's going and it's
yeah,
going. And then
yeah.
shit, because we've been working for a couple of years or 3 years on some of these ideas, and they were starting to get traction, and they were starting to become something that we are known for, that, and poof. And,
Mhm.
you can't mourn it, but it's still like, you can't get lost in that process. You can, and you have to keep going. And it's just, it's just a very dramatic reminder of how you need to keep moving no matter what, and be constantly open to the adjustments. Don't get
Yeah,
comfortable. And yeah, getting
yeah.
your own roots taken out, it hurts sometimes, but you know,
You know, you talk about keeping that momentum or just moving and being flexible and all that, and that really resonates with me. But I
yep,
also remember, you were quiet for some time, right? And you were
yeah,
you were doing a lot of reflecting during this time too.
yep.
And what was that like?
Um, Sometimes pretty damn healthy, actually.
Yeah,
I think there's a few things that are happening when I got quiet. One was, yeah, I was really looking at everything I was working on personally, but also as organizations, and just trying to figure out, like, what do I need to prioritize? What do I need to
yeah,
cut? How do I, like, and spend time with my teams to figure out, like, the reality, and just make sure that I'm taking care of business in that sense. The other thing was, I think the hardest part about this whole thing for me has been, I am so far removed from my community, from the issues I work on,
yeah,
from my
yeah,
clients, that
yeah.
it was actually easier to pull back. And I
Right.
think when I started to kind of come out of it, it was because I realized, like, I was getting really kind of like low in the silo, and you're like, oh, I need to do the work. I need to pull myself back out. So
Yeah,
it was good. I mean, I think, obviously, like, I've just, it's really solidified the whole idea that you need to be adaptable. You need to enjoy the process, more so than anything else. And this has just forced me to do that. And that was one part of the process. And
that's
now, like,
cool.
I'm looking at going back in a month. There's part of me that's really excited about that, because I can actually see how my ideas come out. But there's also part of me that's like, wow, it's gonna be so weird to get back into it, because I've been gone for almost, I mean, we're almost on our ninth month now,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
Eighth,
mean,
eighth
part
month,
of it
eighth
is
month.
just like being mentally gone, physically gone, obviously,
Yeah,
and being busy with the few selected projects that you had, right?
yeah,
But I mean, maintaining a physical presence is such a big deal. I think,
yeah,
just being seen around town, having those coffee meetings, having those meetups, doing those events, those talks, and then of course cutting down on a lot of these videos or the other videos that you've been
yeah.
producing, right? So marketing maybe has taken the biggest hit for you and I both, or has been changing, right? And
Mhm.
so I think when you go back, that's, I don't know, is that one of your top priorities? Is just being visible again, or what do you think your top priorities are when you go back?
So yeah, it's taken a bit of a hit in terms of, like, the physicalness. But what I've
Yeah,
realized is, actually, I've connected with a lot of people that
right.
are having shared experience. And when we go back, when we all meet up, like, I think we'll be closer as a community. I think a lot of people weren't as close
Mhm.
when that all happened as they thought they were. And now, actually, you're starting to really solidify around a community that's really core, and that actually might be stronger than before. So I think that's a good thing. Some priorities when I go back very early on are going to be, one, um, you know, focus with the staff, develop the products, really try and get ourselves into a place where, if it all breaks loose again in December, January, whatever, that we're okay. Right size the offices, like, things like that. Like, the other thing I'm gonna work on is really actually trying to take some ideas forward. Like, there's a lot of things that are happening virtually now. I've developed a lot of relationships and a lot of ideas with people that I never would have, because they're in Europe, or they're in Canada, or they're in Florida, whatever it may be. But now we're like, hey, because we can't do it all ourselves, we should work together. So actually, some of my biggest contracts lately have come from these ideas of, we can work together. You can do the sale, we can do the work. We can do the sale, you can do the work. And, like, but learn to share, learn that together you're better. And I think that that might be something I'll spend a little bit more time on. It's like really formalizing some of these agreements, or some of these relationships, so that we can still do the work. But yeah, it may not be all my upfront investment into my teams and my office and my it might actually be a little bit more we. And I think that's actually, I'm quite excited about, is exploring those things. So,
And I think it's so interesting how, like, we knew that, you were always a very generous and open-minded guy and always built a community, but how this pandemic has forced us to be even more open and look beyond what we normally do,
yeah,
and really benefit your business in some ways. And I think that shows what kind of business person you really are, and how, as you don't know what you don't know yet, and as you
yeah.
evolve, you're gonna find new opportunities as long as you keep moving, like you said before.
It's evolution, right? And
Yeah.
even when in the time of Darwin, not everyone made it through, not everyone made it through gracefully, but the goal is to make it through. And
Right.
you're only going to do that if you can learn how you were in the wrong spot, the wrong model, the wrong whatever, and you accept that and you grow through that process of change.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, think like your new series, man. Like, I fucking love it. Like, I love the conversations, and we were talking about, like, how can you make little adjustments? How can you learn through this process so that you can have a much cleaner product that gets a lot more takeoff? Well, you're only going to learn that if you're trying, right? Like,
Yeah.
so many people have had ideas. Like, we've talked about this before, and even I, man, I dragged those cameras around for years before I turned them on, right? But something catalyzes you to try, and then you learn, and then you adjust, and then you learn, and you just, and you start to see some improvements, right? So
Yeah. And I think, going back to this topic of, like, what have we been doing this past 6 months? I think one of the biggest regrets that I might have is, did I not use this time enough?
right,
I think about that a lot, and I had that going into it, not knowing how long it would last, but knowing that it would be finite in some sense, right?
yeah,
We will eventually get back to normal, whatever that is.
right,
But at the same time, I'm really happy that I embarked on this experiment to try to put out these videos. And I was just, watching you do it and saying, yeah, I know how to do that. I could do that. Right. But but like, do I want to do it the same exact way? Obviously not. I always want to do things my own way, my own twist and my own version of it. Right.
yeah.
And so but you have to do it through trial and error. You have to do that through
You got to learn.
just putting it out there, seeing if you like it or not, and seeing what the audience likes, if there is an audience, and if not, then you have to readjust. And that's been a lot of fun. I mean, like, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are creative, and here you have a chance to actually execute on that creativity to see if if your ideas can come true. And think of it as a hobby. It doesn't really need to generate anything in the upfront. Thankfully, eventually it did for me. And so I think I'm going to continue. And that's been intriguing to me, that these activities can actually become, these fun activities can actually become a business generation tactic.
Yeah.
And because these are experiments, right? So
one thing that's been really interesting is, if you think about, all the topics and all the things that we were talking about doing before any of this happened, right? The things that we ended up, like, spending our time on, we found a reason to be focused. We're like, man, no, that idea was a waste. It wasn't a waste of time a year ago, but now it is. Like, we have to be kind of, I hate the word like intentional, but it's like, you really started to figure out where you had fat on the bone that you needed to cut off in order to accomplish some things that were really close to bone and that were really important to you. And so, yeah, I mean, that whole rebuild series for you was like, man, you had a theme, and you had the 5 people, and you had a conversation, and it actually, by being so focused, it allowed you to have all those conversations, to get through the editing process, to like, to do that. But if you had been like how I took it, like, which is just like random level, like, I don't think in this time that anyone should kind of go through that unintentionally, like experimentally per se. Like, finding that focus is really, it's something that I think I'm coming out of, like, man, my time is a lot more valuable now. Like, I don't regret what I didn't get done. I, of course, recognize I could have done more, but I also value a little bit of the quiet space now, knowing that I can take it, versus, say, when I get back into the mix, like when I get back to Shanghai, man, I better not be wasting time, right? Like, seriously. Now that doesn't mean I need to work 22 hours, but it definitely means like I need to be a little bit more focused on the work and on some of the projects I take on. And I think you'll end up finding better product, and tactically you'll get more clients or whatever out of it. But you're not going to get there being, I don't know, as adventurous as we were back in the day, which is, it's great. There's no regrets there, but it's learning, and you just shave in over time.
Yeah, I think with this, I think everybody's been a lot more reflective through the past 6 months, and I think that's been this really interesting side effect that has been forced upon us.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you don't like the word intentional. I love the word intentional, right? I love it, right? Like, I mean, that's what we're missing in a lot of business and in a lot of like just the way we live. And so I love that word. And here, because all our expectations and assumptions about the way things are, about the right way of doing things, that's all been flipped upside down and torn apart very, very violently.
Yeah.
Like I'm excited because it has changed my business for the better. And it sounds weird, and it sounds like
right. So
absurd, and maybe I'm just
about
lucky.
How?
Yeah. I think we were planning to leave China sometime in 2020, 2021, and second half of 2020.
Right.
And we left, it turns out we left much sooner. We found a place that we feel very, very in sync with, or good vibes with.
Yep.
I think that matters as I start this next chapter or phase of my career. And that's number one. And number two, obviously this whole virtual thing, it makes things like, I was so trapped as being known as the workshop guy, the playful, fun, creative guy, and I played that role. But of course it gets boring, right? And now, and I still will do it. If you want to hire me, I'll do that. Okay. Like, we could talk, but
let's make great.com.
Yeah. But I'm also very, very thankful that now I can have these very intimate one-on-one conversations with my clients around their business in a different way, where I'm not just being the fun guy. I'm being, the intentional, thoughtful, strategic guy. And I think that's it's flexing this other muscle that I really enjoy.
Did some of the entrepreneurs that you were interviewing become clients then?
I rather not say.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. To protect privacy. But I'll say that I think it's shown other people another side of me, and also it is attracting people who may not necessarily like to read content.
Right.
But then they enjoy watching videos.
Right.
And just all these different aspects. And it was really a surprise to me, because in 1 week, when I don't do advertising or like publicizing that I have this service, I'll be your coach for the low price of whatever. Right.
Right.
But in 1 week, there was these 4 requests, and that just like shocking to me.
Right.
It was a very good week. It didn't repeat itself in that way, but I mean,
well, like, did you reverse engineer what happened then? Did you look at was it a specific video?
Me, I did. I reversed everything. I just looked at everything, and it's just it's a mixture of existing contacts and this new work that I'm doing with the video series. And I think so. I can't say it was the video series directly, but
it helped.
And then just for me, familiarizing myself with this technology, or just doing this whole thing, getting used to it, and thankfully having the market get used to it too. I think that really matters. And so that's how this pandemic has helped my business specifically. Because who knows if I'll be able to, like, how Let's Make Great will operate as a global entity rather than an Asia or a China entity.
Right.
I'm still trying to figure that out, but at least I can have this other segment of work, or this other stream of work. And that's exciting to me. First of all, because I love it. Second of all, because it might pay enough. And well, it's cool. Creates that flexibility.
One of the things I was also thinking about during this time was, I wasn't putting out a lot of content. Right. Yeah. And I was intentional about that a little bit as well. The first couple months I was thinking, there's a lot of people who got thrown into this pool unwillingly. Right. and they had to learn how to swim. And what they were going to do is they were going to throw up tons of content that just confused everybody. Now, to stand above in that is going to be difficult, but you and I both know how hard it is to maintain the long tail of this content kind of development,
Consistency,
editing, like, to do 200, 300, 400, like daily consistent. It could be articles, it could be Instagram, like you were doing your little, the gifts
Still
that you were
doing
doing
it.
for
Still
years.
doing
Like,
it. Yeah.
that stuff over time is what kind of leads people back to you. And like, it may not be the sell itself, but it's going to show people that you have that consistency and the quality of consistency as well. That is what, makes or breaks a deal for them, or what leads them to reach out to you and not to the other 95 others who are doing the exact same thing that we are. And I think now that I'm getting back into it, I've also learned a lot about what does good quality versus bad quality look like online. What makes for a good editing of a Zoom conversation? How do you keep people engaged? Like, it's more than just the conversation. It's also the transitions. It's also the thumbnail. Like, and there'll be a lot of people who spend hours on that stuff, and there's people who won't.
Sure, for sure. This has been a great process. I think I'm excited for it. What do you think you learned from, like, if you took a macro perspective now in the past 6 months, what either it could be a principle, a mindset, business tactic, like whatever, like, I'm curious, what do you think is what would you say? Like 3 things, top 3.
Well, I've never believed more in my work at the macro picture.
Wow.
Like,
That's
our
cool.
cities are struggling to keep up with the challenges on the systems. And that's not just the virus itself and all the ripples, but it has absolutely exposed the challenges that I was always worried about, be it healthcare, poverty, food safety, whatever. So I know that, and fortunately through this, people now are starting to understand that. 2 is the need to focus at a system level is also never been great. And I used to think that we could, on kind of like event by event, product by product, engagement by engagement, really chip away at this. I think that's too slow. And so what I'm learning is, while my current and previous business model was really consulting and client-based, I need to start thinking platform system-based if I want to have the change, or if I want to affect change against those problems that I still see. Yeah. And then the last one would be, you just have to constantly hack away. You cannot look for gains in the first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever. And you may not be the person. I have a thing coming out that I'm going to write, like, basically, like, you don't need to lead forever. Actually, I might just be the first person who breaks through the first line, and it's my goal to pass it backwards so the next group can actually be the one that gets past the goalpost. And I think that, while I've never been one who wanted to stand up on stage and be like, I'm the guy, I definitely am a lot less inclined to ever put myself in that position than I was before. I just think, like, I'm just kind of, it's not necessarily that I'm learning things new, but again, it's really solidifying things, amplifying others, and making me think about, how do I just prioritize whatever so that I'm oriented in the right way for when the flag goes green, that we can all just move forward. So
that's really cool, man. Wow. That's really massive lessons, I think.
Dude, I like 3 months of Zen coming up with that.
I could see how that is. That I'm really impressed. First of all, I'm impressed, like, obviously, right? And I'm just thinking about it for my own self. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Like, I do need to work on a systems level. Like, why am I posting these Instagram graphics?
But no, you need to do that, right? Like, this is the hard part, is like, you still need to do everything that we were doing before. We need the videos, we need the Instagram, we need the write-up, we need to go through the challenges of HR and cash flow. Like, you're not going to get away from any of that, but you have a kind of a different approach as to why you're doing all that than before. And
I mean, the obvious, or like the traditional cliche metaphor is like, are you working in the business or on the business, right? And so I think this is a very, very clear demonstration of that. Like, we are all about impact. Okay, great. Mm-hmm. What's the best way to do that? Now, if we're going to take a step back and reflect on these things, how maybe there's a much better systemic way to
Right.
really to change the
And
metrics for the better.
you still might not get there. You might actually, in making these changes, go the wrong way. And you might
That's
have
part
been
of the
right
process,
before.
right?
But that's I think that's the other thing I'm learning is like you just gotta,
Yeah.
I mean, I got burned out. I used to take this really hard, and now I'm like, it's okay. Like it's part of the path, right?
Yeah.
And you're in the second leg of your ultra marathon. It's like the pain might be there, but you have to just be really clear about what you're doing it for.
Yeah, man. Wow.
So, I mean, what about you? Like, where's this? I mean, you got the video series, which I've seen. I've seen that you kept up all the other content, and that's great. You mentioned some new business. I mean, if you think big picture, like, where are you headed? And, like,
Yeah.
what's the business model look like for you post COVID or through the rest of COVID?
So the business model, I think, will, even though I'm doing this individual consulting, I don't anticipate the revenue becoming to offset or equal what
Mhm.
my corporate consulting was. This is individual to individual, right?
Right.
And then as well as the my online products that I have on the website,
Mhm.
that I was able to put out as well and develop that further. And so the library of tools that we offer has become greater, and I'm really happy about that.
Right.
Uh, but honestly, corporate consulting, organizational work, that just pays a lot better. It's a lot more long term. It's a lot more
Yeah.
meaty. I can involve other people. It becomes a team sport, which is you're always playing a team sport whether you like it or not. This is what role you're playing, right?
Right.
So I think so. What's happened is the business model has become more diverse in how it's coming in, even more diverse than it was before,
Mhm.
and it's become more focused on innovation and incubation type work. So I'm really happy about that.
Right.
Um, those are the core things to how the business model's changed, uh, and as well as it moving. I've talked about it before, but I was so China centric. Uh,
Yeah.
I always wanted to move and become more international while keeping that team there. That's a whole other story. But this is another change in the business model. Now my
Yeah.
clients this year has not been from China, not a single one. I didn't tell them I wasn't there,
Awesome.
but not a single client has come from China, despite that being the most active market
Yeah.
that there is right now. I think,
Right. Right.
all my friends there, they're saying we're getting business. We're getting like a lot more business than before.
Mhm.
And we're basically
So
recovered.
if you think about the work that you did in China and you think about the
Yeah.
work that you're doing now,
Yeah.
what are the things that what are the tools that you carried out of China that apply to your other clients, be it Europe or wherever
Yeah.
you're sourcing them?
China's a tough market. It's very competitive. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people there and a lot of different offers. And I'm very, very glad I started there because it was also very forgiving, which we talked about before as
Mhm.
well. And I was able to experiment with my identity and my market positioning and who and how it came to
Right.
be. Uh, and so I gained a lot of confidence in that. I get to carry some of that confidence over because I'm still not sure if Europe as a market is going to accept me or America as a market is going to accept me. Uh, but I have this sneaky feeling that it will because I was
Right.
able to make it in Shanghai, which is hyper competitive market.
Yeah.
Um, and and I realized as another tactic that I've been deploying over the past 6 months was improve my social media, not just in the content, but in the outreach to new people. And
Mhm.
so the numbers of my social media went up somewhat.
Yeah.
And as that went up, the people I'm interacting with there became more. And those
Right.
conversations, they were very similar to the conversations I was having in China. And so that also gave me confidence. It's like,
Yeah.
oh shit, people are people are
They can
people.
transition. Yeah.
Exactly. As long as you know people and principles, you can still help people or help organizations or whatever it is in the same way. And
Right.
so
Right.
that also gave me more confidence. And so yeah,
So
that all of these changes.
with that, is there like if you look at the products that you have, the book, the game, the other things, like do you now need to kind of revisit them and internationalize them a bit? Like were they a little bit too China specific and you're actually finding the tools, the
So
mindsets,
those
whatever can be?
products, yeah, those products were always intended for the international market.
Mm,
So it was great that I did that. And that was the leading edge of my international expansion. Uh,
gotcha.
as many years as ago as that was, that's how long I've been thinking about it. That's why I
Mm,
said COVID really just accelerated my exit in some
right.
ways. Um, the how I'll need to internationalize, I think, is maybe structurally, like having an organization in Europe, having a visa in Europe long term. I think these structural things I'll need to start to think about, as
Yep.
well as the network, which is what I've been trying to build. And still, I mean, China, the English speaking corporate innovation market is relatively small, or not small, but like you can reach people relatively quickly, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
the innovation leads, the entrepreneurial leads, the incubators, the accelerator, you could get to know everybody fairly quickly.
Sure.
But here we're talking about the rest of the world, all the different time zones, and reaching those people, reaching those languages, and just making sure you get to know the right people. That's going to take time. And
Yeah.
so this is like year one
Right.
of Let's Migrate in 2013. So I get to play that whole game all over again,
Yeah.
but with the knowledge or confidence that, okay, it's a numbers game. You got to outreach. You got to position yourself in an interesting way. You got to have your vision, a compelling vision. You got to be open-minded about what you're offering to them. And yeah, and so like, almost like replaying the same level of a video
Mhm.
game, but having like an extra, you have like extra strength this time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
hopefully it'll
Sure.
be a little bit faster.
No, I mean, it's just been such a learning process. And there's been aspects of it that have been really just kind of like, oh, I don't want to deal with that right now. But, I've always said, like, you got to work off a compass, not GPS, because you are not going to get there in the most efficient way ever.
All right. Right.
So break out the map, look at the summit, just plot on, because that's really
Yeah.
all that you can do. Um, yeah, it's been a hell of a time.
Yeah. I think that's, our conversations here, we
Yep.
call it behind the grind. And I think it really helps a lot of people
Yep.
who are going through the grind themselves. And in some
Yeah.
ways I feel like, I'm sorry we let them down and we didn't continue. But
Yeah.
I think, but also I'm sure everyone is going through their own grind. And so I'm very, very glad to be back. I think that's more important that we're back now. We're having these conversations again.
Yeah.
And, I want to invite people who are watching to share their lessons and their
Yeah.
experiences and thoughts about the grind
And that's
over the
actually,
past 6
I'm
months.
I'm going to address that in my upcoming video, because I know that people will be understanding. Like, Rich, it's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
But you know
of
what? Like,
course.
it was a principle that this was important to us and important to
Yeah,
the community. And I'm like, if I regret anything, it's not kind of keeping that commitment. I mean, of course,
yeah,
there's excuses, there's reasons, whatever.
yeah,
But just that's what we're learning is like,
right.
you will basically, you might drop it a little bit, but it will come. If it's important, it comes back and you can move things forward. And
Yeah,
for now, we have a consistent time every week that we're going to do this, assuming Brian doesn't move Airbnb too many times. I'm actually headed back to Shanghai, fingers crossed, end of the month.
that's right.
But we're just going to keep it going, and that's what you can
Good.
control, right?
Yeah, man. That's cool. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Good luck with your trip back. I guess we'll have a few more of these before you go. So,
Yeah,
um,
we
man,
will.
behind the grind, it feels good to be back.
Feels good to be back, man. So thank you very much. Great catching up. I will see you again next week.